The conference hall smelled of polished marble and too much ambition. Midtown glass reflected back 200 faces gathered for the quarterly all-hands. Screens glowed with charts and buzzwords, the usual theater of success. I sat quietly in the third row, notebook balanced on my lap, pretending to care about the parade of numbers I'd already prepared weeks ago. Then Marcus Ellery, our CEO, cleared his throat. The room shifted. He was supposed to transition into the standard vision statement portion of the meeting, but instead his gaze locked on me. "Clara," he said, voice smooth like it always was before he dropped the knife. "Would you join me up here?" A ripple went through the rows. I felt 200 pairs of eyes trail me as I walked to the stage, heels echoing against the marble. I expected a token gesture of acknowledgement for my 15 years, maybe some hollow thanks before being quietly escorted out later. What I didn't expect was the smile on his face. "This," Marcus declared, gesturing toward me like I was a prop, "is how power works." The room froze. His hand sliced the air as if he were conducting an orchestra of silence. Effective immediately. "Clara Vera is no longer with this company." Gasps. Then the shuffle of eyes dropping to phones or shoelaces. My body stayed still, though inside something snapped into perfect clarity. He wanted humiliation, spectacle. But the twist cut deeper. Marcus's next words came with a triumphant flourish. "Please welcome Jared Knox, who will be stepping into Clara's role." Jared. The young analyst I'd mentored from his first day. The one who used to leave handwritten notes on my desk thanking me for every chance I gave him. He walked on stage in a tailored suit, grin too wide, hand extended not to me but to Marcus. It was betrayal wrapped in a handshake, my so-called protege bowing to the man who had just gutted me. I didn't flinch. I didn't cry. I simply let a smile creep across my face, slow and unnerving. It made Jared falter, made Marcus glance twice as if wondering what I knew that they didn't. The silence that followed wasn't weakness. It was the first brick I laid in something far stronger. I stepped down from the stage with steady poise, heading back toward the rows of averted eyes, already thinking of what waited in the locked drawer of my office. Walking back to my seat, I caught the way people's eyes darted from me like I carried a contagion. Some I'd eaten lunch with 100 times. Others I'd defended when budgets were slashed. Now, every one of them found new fascination in their phones or coffee cups. 15 years. That was the sum of it. 15 years since I stepped into this company with nothing but a second-hand laptop and a head full of numbers no one else wanted to decipher. Investor relations was a corner desk with a broken chair when I arrived. Little more than an afterthought. I built it brick by brick, reporting schedules, data pipelines, crisis playbooks. I was the one who translated chaos into language Wall Street could swallow. I remembered the fall of '08 when our balance sheets bled red, and Marcus, then still a rising executive, had whispered to me, "If you can make the analysts trust us, we'll survive." I worked 3 nights without sleep, rewriting projections until my eyes blurred, crafting narratives that steadied the stock price just enough to keep us from collapse. Marcus called me mission critical then, like I was the oxygen running through the building. There were more nights like that than I could count. Nights when I stared at glowing spreadsheets while the cleaning crew vacuumed around my heels. When my dinner was vending machine pretzels washed down with flat soda, I carried their mistakes, concealed their excesses, polished their lies into something investors would buy. And now, standing on that stage, Marcus had erased it all with one sentence. Jared smiled at his new title, and the room applauded politely. Not for me, but for him. I sat back down, my notebook still open to the agenda I had prepared, the ink smudged by the sweat of my hand. The applause faded into murmurs. then into the dull hum of air conditioning. No one looked at me. It was as if I had never existed. I pressed the notebook shut, slipped it into my bag, and reminded myself of what waited for me upstairs in the drawer no one had touched yet. The walk back to my office felt like moving through a corridor of wax figures. Faces I'd known for years stiffened as I passed, frozen smiles plastered on while their eyes sank to the floor. No one spoke, not a word of thanks, not a whisper of protest, only the hollow shuffle of shoes against carpet. My nameplate was already gone from the door. In its place, a strip of tape scrawled with the word transitioning. Efficient little vultures. I pushed the door open and stepped into the only space that had ever really been mine in this building. The air still carried the faint scent of cinnamon gum and toner, like the ghosts of late nights past. I moved mechanically, taking my mug with the chip shaped like Ohio, the framed photo from the last Christmas Zoom party, the paperweight of a sinking ship gifted by a boss long gone. Small things, tokens of years they couldn't erase. Then I opened the bottom drawer. The key turned with a click I could feel in my bones. Inside lay the thin black folder no one else had ever touched. The real quarterly report, line after line of raw, unvarnished numbers, 62 million in outflows scattered like breadcrumbs leading back to Marcus and the CFO, unallocated consulting, strategic partnerships, the kind of phrases that look harmless until you peel them open and find rot. Jared's initials were there too, scrawled in digital ink on the approval pages. My protege had signed the lie with the same hand I'd once guided through his first budget draft. I stared at the folder for a long time, fingers resting on the edge. I could have slipped it into my bag. I could have walked out with the smoking gun. But evidence in my hands would make me the story. Evidence left behind would make it theirs. I shut the folder, turned the key, and left it locked where it belonged, a bomb waiting for the right hands to open it. With my bag on my shoulder, I stepped into the hallway, already knowing this wasn't the end of what I had planned. Brooklyn was quieter than Midtown, the streets already cooling under the weight of dusk. I dropped my bag by the door, kicked off my heels, and let the silence wrap around me. The fridge hummed like it always did, steady and indifferent. I poured a glass of red wine, more spite than Merlot, and sat at the kitchen table with the laptop that had carried me through more battles than Marcus ever knew. The screen glowed to life, and for a moment I half expected a 403 access denied to slam shut in my face. But the portal opened without protest, my name still in the corner, admin rights intact, HR's oversight, their arrogance. Or maybe just laziness. I leaned back in my chair, sipping slowly, scrolling through the files. There it was, the glossy fiction Marcus and the CFO had signed, a neat stack of euphemisms polished until they shined, expenses labeled as strategic reinvestments, losses buried under anticipated partnerships. Jared's signature rested at the bottom like a seal of betrayal. I clicked away from it and pulled up my own draft, the one saved under an innocuous label they never thought to delete. The numbers bared their teeth on the screen, 62 million in outflows with no justification. Invoices pointing back to boardroom pockets, raw, ugly truth no amount of spin could disguise. The investor call was scheduled for 9 the next morning. I scrolled down to the publish settings, my hand steady, a few keystrokes, a confirmation click, and the system cued the real report to go live at 8:59 a.m., 1 minute before the lies could find their stage. I drained the last of my glass and shut the laptop. The hum of the fridge, the faint hiss of traffic outside, even the sound of my own breathing, all of it folded into a calm that felt heavier than rage. The decision was made, and now the countdown had begun. The wine had left a dull warmth in my chest, but my hands were steady as I opened LinkedIn. Notifications stacked like confetti, most of them irrelevant until one post pinned me in place. Jared Knox. His face glowed in the filtered light of a corporate headshot, his caption smug and triumphant. Honored to step into a leadership role at a pivotal time for the company. A new era of transparency begins today. I nearly laughed. Transparency. The word clung to the screen like a bad joke, a hollow echo of every late night I'd spent rewriting reports to cover someone else's mistakes. I remembered Jared's first weeks, how he'd struggled with basic reconciliations, how I'd walked him through the ledger until he could finally see patterns instead of numbers. Back then, he called me his mentor, even bought me coffee with his first paycheck. Now he was Marcus's golden boy, polishing the knife he'd left in my back. My thumb hovered over the screen, and memories spilled fast conference calls at midnight, my eyes burning under fluorescent lights, while Marcus stumbled through presentations I had built line by line. Unpaid weekends spent smoothing out disasters so executives could keep their bonuses. My voice had steadied them through market dips. My hands had stitched holes in their credibility. And still, I was discarded like a footnote, erased by a sentence. For a moment, anger rose sharp in my throat. But then it flattened, cooled, hardened into something cleaner. Marcus thought firing me in public was the end of my story. Jared thought stepping into my seat made him legitimate. They were both wrong. I set my phone down, pushed my empty glass aside, and let the silence settle. They didn't fire me. They freed me, and tomorrow morning, when the clock struck 8:59, they would learn what freedom looked like from the other side. I woke before the alarm. My body already knew what day it was. The city outside my window hadn't quite shaken off the gray of dawn, but my kitchen light carved out a small island of clarity. I padded across the floor barefoot, hair pulled into a careless knot, hoodie hanging loose around my shoulders. The coffee was black, bitter. Just the way I needed it. I held the mug in both hands as if it were a compass pointing me steady. On the laptop screen, the investor portal dashboard blinked awake. My name still sat in the admin corner, the system oblivious to the fact that I no longer belonged. At exactly 59 a.m., the scheduled post triggered. A small green check appeared beside the file name. Confirmation that the real quarterly report had been released. 1 minute early, 1 minute unspinnable. Within seconds, the participant list of the investor call populated, names scrolling down the sidebar like a ledger of power. Goldman, Fidelity, BlackRock, the usual suspects. 120 institutional investors had logged on, each with their headsets and muted microphones, each with eyes trained on the numbers I had just unleashed. Marcus's name appeared at the top of the panel, the CFO's just below it. Both were connected. Both were silent. I imagined them staring at their screens, watching their fiction crumble under the weight of truth. The carefully massaged narrative they thought would carry the morning had been replaced by raw decimals that cut like glass. I sipped my coffee slowly, letting the heat sting my tongue. The silence stretched, thick and expectant. Normally, these calls began with practiced banter, polite greetings, a round of empty optimism before the CFO launched into his buzzword sermon. Not today. Today, the leaders of the company sat muted, their confidence strangled by the numbers they couldn't bury. From my kitchen table, I watched the little gray bubbles sit at the top of the screen, still and useless. My report was already open in 100 windows, dissected by sharp eyes trained to find blood in balance sheets. The stillness pressed on the call like a storm waiting to break, and I leaned back in my chair, knowing the silence itself had already spoken louder than they ever could. 3 full minutes dragged across the call like an eternity. The participant count kept climbing. 120, 125, 130. Every face stayed muted, waiting. The silence heavier than any speech. Then a voice cut through, measured, calm, and final. Can someone explain the 62 million in untagged outflows? Chairman Holt's words landed like a blade. The CFO's icon flickered. His voice stumbled out, thin and uncertain. Yes. That particular figure represents transitional consultant costs and deferred initiatives associated with legacy integration. He didn't finish. Another voice unmuted, sharp as a whip. Which consultants? Why are they unnamed? It came from an analyst in London. Marcus finally stepped in, tone drenched in practiced charm. What you're seeing is a reflection of strategic realignment. We're confident this expenditure positions us for long-term growth. He barely reached the end before another investor interrupted. Growth. You've lost track of $62 million. That's not strategy. That's negligence. The questions rolled in, each one striking harder than the last. Why is this not disclosed in previous guidance? Where are the invoices? How does this reconcile with Q2? I could almost hear Marcus straining for air, his favorite buzzwords crumbling. Operational synergy, forward momentum. None of them could mask the raw data blinking in front of those analysts. They weren't just hearing excuses, they were comparing numbers, tracing breadcrumbs straight to the CFO's office. From my kitchen table, I scrolled through the call log. Investors had already downloaded the appendix, the one I'd buried with invoice references and project codes. My fingerprints were gone, but the truth was all there, screaming louder than any accusation I could ever make. Marcus tried again, voice cracking under pressure. We believe these figures, when contextualized, reflect our proactive approach. Another investor cut him off cold. Stop spinning. Start answering. The silence that followed was worse than shouting. It was the moment the guillotine hangs above the neck, waiting for gravity to finish the job. I leaned back, coffee cooling at my side, and watched the blade begin its descent. I opened a second tab and pulled up the live market feed. The ticker pulsed red, dropping like a stone. Within 10 minutes, the stock was down 7%, volume spiking as if the floor had just given way. Back on the call, investors had stopped asking polite questions. They were circling like sharks now, their voices layered over one another, referencing exact pages, footnotes, invoice codes, all pulled directly from the 42-page report I had scheduled. Each download notification appeared in the system log Vanguard, Bridgewater, CalPERS. Even the smaller funds, the ones usually too timid to challenge, were quoting my appendix back at Marcus. The screen showed him stiff in his leather chair, lips moving but no sound coming out until the CFO jumped in with another flimsy deflection. It didn't matter. The truth had already left the cage. And then I noticed Jared. His camera feed sat in the bottom corner, jaw tight, sweat pooling along his hairline. He tried to look composed, nodding every time Marcus spoke, but his signature was stamped across too many pages. He knew it. And so did I. His LinkedIn boast about transparency had aged about as well as spoiled milk. Another investor broke through the noise, voice clipped and cold. Page 27 lists 4 separate outflows tied to consulting with no project codes. How do you expect us to value your integrity when you can't even account for your cash? Marcus froze. His silence said more than any spin he might have attempted. The pause stretched long enough for the market feed to tick down another percentage point. From my kitchen table, I took another sip of coffee, lukewarm but perfect in its timing. Years of carefully staged narratives were unraveling in real time. threads pulled loose by people who knew exactly where to tug. And just as the tension reached breaking point, another voice entered the call, sharper than the rest, carrying the weight of verdicts yet to come. The call had dissolved into overlapping accusations when a new voice cut through the noise, steady and immovable. This is Stephen Blackwell, representing institutional clients holding 12% of the float. We'll be taking this discussion offline. The effect was immediate. The question stopped. The silence carried the weight of verdicts already sealed. Everyone on that call understood what those words meant: lawsuits, subpoenas, closed-door sessions where careers were traded like poker chips. I toggled back to the report log, scanning the metadata. That's when I saw it. Every one of those fabricated versions carried digital approval trails. Marcus and the CFO, of course, but also Jared, his initials, his timestamp, woven into the fraud like threads in a noose. A sour satisfaction tightened in my chest. The boy who once thanked me for teaching him pivot tables was now bound to Marcus's fate. Mentee turned traitor, now collateral damage. He'd signed off on the rot to curry favor, and now his signature was a nail hammered into his own coffin. I returned to the call window. Marcus sat frozen, the CFO frantically flipping through papers off screen. And Jared looked pale, eyes darting like a man already rehearsing his denial. He tried to speak, but his mic cut in too late, swallowed by the abrupt closing of the session. The platform blinked, then ended without ceremony. No thank yous, no closing remarks, just a screen gone black, leaving behind the echo of consequences they couldn't escape. I sat back, hands folded around the cooling mug, the quiet of my kitchen more profound than applause. The dominoes had tipped. Marcus's career was crumbling, the CFO's reputation gutted, and Jared, the boy who thought betrayal was a shortcut, was marked right alongside them. The fire I'd lit wasn't selective, and that was the beauty of it. I closed the laptop and stepped toward the balcony, the city humming with life below, ready to consider what came next for me. I left the laptop closed on the table, the black screen reflecting nothing back at me. The call had ended, the verdict delivered without my voice ever entering the room. I slid open the balcony door and stepped into the cool Brooklyn air, the city stretching out in restless motion beneath me. From here, Midtown's towers looked smaller, less intimidating, like monuments to a game I no longer had to play. I didn't rush to LinkedIn. There would be no victory post, no smug update about career transitions or new beginnings. Let Marcus and Jared cling to platforms and platitudes. I had something else in mind. The next morning, instead of drafting resumes or taking calls from recruiters who would circle once the scandal went public, I opened a clean browser window and registered a name that had been sitting in the back of my mind for years. Vera Advisory, a boutique consultancy specializing in what I knew best: narrative risk, the art of spotting the lies companies tell investors and the cracks they leave behind. By noon, I had a website template live. By evening, I had my first inquiry. An analyst from a hedge fund I'd once steadied during a shaky quarter sent me a private message. "If you're available, we'd like to bring you in for guidance." The irony was delicious. The very people Marcus had tried to shield from me now sought me out directly. Calls multiplied, messages stacked. They didn't want the company anymore. They wanted me, the one who had never needed spin to see the truth. I stood on the balcony again that night, phone buzzing in my pocket, watching the glow of Manhattan shimmer like a theater across the river. For the first time in years, I felt free, not owned, not silenced, not erased. They thought power was firing me in public. Real power is choosing who I work for and who I never work for again.